you in regards to that. The last thing that I wanted to share with you, which I've been thinking a lot about, is what you've seen in the title of today, which are these three big personal questions. So many of you will know that over the last 6 years, I've been looking at two questions. Number one, how does somebody start with nothing and build an incredible life? Okay? You start off on a council estate, how do you get away from that? You were born into a household of people who are all obese, all overweight. How does somebody become an anomaly and break out of that? You've always been poor. Your entire lineage of family have all been poor. How do you break out of that and be the first person not to be poor? That's what I wanted to know, was my first question. Is that possible? And if it is, how does somebody even do that? Second question is it possible to do that and also be a good person and not step on other people to get there and not turn out to be a dickhead? And when you get to become successful, not end up like Heath Ledger and committing suicide, not end up like Whitney Houston and end up taking cocaine and essentially damaging your body, your mental health, being in toxic relationships, essentially running yourself into the grave. So my question was, are there people who have mastered both those areas? They've got what they want starting from nothing, and they're a damn good person and they have an incredible life. Now, in the quest to that, I came to realize that if you're somebody who wants to have that kind of life, there are essentially three questions that you've got to ask yourself at some point. I wanted to share them with you because I hope they can add some value to you. So the first one that I wanted to share with you is this. The first question is, what do you want? Now, I know this sounds ridiculous and it's kind of like, well, what do you mean, Cass? What do you mean, what do I want? I mean, have you ever sat down by yourself and you've said, do you know what? I know my mum wants me to do this. I know my mum wants me to get married to this kind of woman, a Pakistani, a Muslim, a woman who is homely, whatever, white, black, Chinese, whatever it may be. But what do I want? I know that most people end up working for a company, but what do I want to work for a company, or do I want to set my own business? I know a lot of people tend to work in offices, but would I like to work at home? Right? What kind of life do I want to have? Do I want to have the kind of life where I work 6 months of the year and then I take 6 months off? What do I define to be success? What kind of life would I have to be living in order for me to be successful? Am I the kind of person who wants the highest level of success that they can? I mean, I have to have the best of everything. Right? I have to have the best cars. I mean Ferraris. I mean Bugattis. I have to have the biggest houses, so it has to be a mansion, 5, 6, 7 bedrooms. I have to have the fittest girl. She has to be a model, or she has to be like some Swiss goddess. I don't know. Or am I okay with just somebody who genuinely is a loving person? They're kind. They're always there for you. They're always loyal. Whatever. In other words, you have to come to a point in your life where you ask yourself what it is that you want. Not what you want based on society, not what you want based on your parents, not what you want based on because other people have it, but genuinely, for you as a person, you have to look inwards and ask yourself, what would I like to have? So that's one of the big first questions that I think is really important. And if you look around at society, I've got to tell you guys, you will be shocked at the amount of people who I ask, what do you want? And they have no clue. I mean, it sounds like people say to me every time I say this to them, they look at me as if like, what do you mean, Cass? Surely most people know what they want. Technically speaking, yes, most people do know what they want. But they've never actually decided that that is what they want. They've never sat down and said, right, genuinely, this is success. This is what I want in 5, 10, 16, 30 years. Now, guys, by me saying this, can I just put a side note? When I say that you decide what you want, this doesn't mean that you have to be married by 30. If you decide that you would like to get married, it doesn't mean that you have to be married by 30. It doesn't mean that everything is going to work out in a certain way. Because as most of you guys know by now, if you've lived around the life a little bit, it's all very nice you having plans, but life gets in the way. right? Sometimes you have to focus on your job. Sometimes you go through depression. Sometimes people let you down. Life just doesn't go the way that you think it's going to go, right? And so there has to be room in your life for improvisation, for life. So that's the first one. Decide what you want. Second thing that you have to decide is the experience that you want to have in life. So I think it's pretty evident. If you've looked around at life, you pretty much have noticed that being successful is not attributed to a certain race or a certain type of person or to a certain age, right? There are 20-year-olds who are millionaires. There are people who are 70 and have no savings. There are people who are black and have multiple businesses. There are people who are Chinese and they just like to play video games and they've never really held a job in their life. There are some people who are dickheads and they're owners of companies. So essentially what I realized was that, okay, you can have whatever you want, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be a good person. That doesn't mean that you're going to be happy. That doesn't mean that you're going to be fulfilled, right? So the second question that you have to ask yourself at some point is, what is it going to take for me to get what I want in life and still be happy? And also, even deeper than that is, how do you define happiness? What does it mean in your definition to be happy? Is happiness having a family? Because you could say that happiness is having a family, right? And you almost will look at me as if I'm some nutcase, like, well, what do you mean, Cass? Of course, if you haven't got a family, how can you be happy? But I can tell you, I know loads of people who could think of nothing worse than being tied down to a family and you have kids and your kids rule your life. They ain't interested, mate. They don't want to have kids at all. They're just not interested, right? Now, you could psychological say, well, they will change, blah, blah, blah. It's not your job to tell people what they should be doing with their life. You mind your own business and you live your own life, is what I would say to you. Personally, as Kasim. So you've got to decide, what is happiness to you? Is happiness to you having a 3-bedroom house, semi-detached, in a village somewhere? Is happiness to you having the freedom to travel anywhere you want? Is a freedom for you having 100k in your bank account? Or happiness or joy? And actually, even bigger than that, an even bigger question is, do you even think that happiness is even that big of a thing? Because some people actually don't even think happiness is even that. It's not really an aspect of life which they think, in order for me to live a good life, I have to be happy, or I have to be fulfilled, or I have to be joyous or abundant. Some people don't even think that. That is not what qualifies to them as making a remarkable life. And so for you, you may have to decide, because you might say, actually, Kasim, you might think, for example, like someone like Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was prepared to go to prison for 28 years of his life and sacrifice being with his wife, sacrifice his friends, sacrifice freedom, because he believed that his purpose was a bigger thing to him than his happiness, than his freedom. I don't know, maybe for you that is something that you thought about, but essentially my point being is, at some point you have to decide for yourself exactly what constitutes a good life. Are you the kind of person who says, Kasim, I'm telling you now that if I am not a good person and I am not doing everything authentically, then I can never consider myself to be successful? I don't know, maybe that might be you, right? In which case, obviously, your journey is going to take longer, because if you want to do things the right way and you don't want to cheat anyone and you don't want to step on anybody, that means that your route is going to take longer. And that's just the truth. We all know that. If you decide to lie and cheat and whatever, you're probably going to get ahead quicker. Obviously, the world, I don't even want to get into this, but the world has been designed in such a way that cheaters and liars never, in the long run, ever make it, because eventually they get found out, right? You can only cheat and lie for so long before you're found out. But my point being is, if that may be something even you decide. You might be listening to me and saying to me, actually, Cass, I would much rather make £1 million and lie and cheat, but make it in 2 years than wait 20 years and get it. Might be for you. For example, you guys who are listening to me, you've heard of people who are robbers, right? Robbers want to become wealthy, but guess what they're prepared to do? They are not prepared to wait to do it the right way for 10, 15, 20, 30 years to become millionaires or to earn a lot of money, so they're prepared to take it. That you might be listening to me and you saying, well, Kasim, that's the path I want to go down. Some people, the way they become millionaires is by starting companies. But if you start your own company, it takes time to start a company. Sometimes your company may not make a lot of money until 40 years down the line. Are you prepared to wait 40 years? Or you could go and rob a bank and do it in a day. Do you see what I'm saying? It's all swings and roundabouts, and that's why you have to decide for yourself what it means. And the last thing that I wanted to share with you, which I think a lot of you guys have never really thought about very deeply, is around this question of what is your contribution? Because I know for a lot of you guys who are listening, this is probably at the moment not really going to be a problem for you. But believe this or not, there are some people who've got to a point in their life where they've got everything that they've ever dreamed of. And I know for a lot of people, that's like, Cass, how is that even possible? It's possible. Some people are married, they have a child, they have a great job, they make a lot of money, they own their own house, they have nearly paid off their mortgage, already paid off their mortgage, they have rental properties, they have great friendships, they get to travel around the world, they're healthy. I mean, genuinely, their life is pretty good. Now, you may not think that that is a problem, but it actually is a problem, right? It becomes a huge problem because it's like, what do you do when you're 35 and all of those things you've reached them? Well, the answer is you go back and help other people essentially rise to the same level that you've managed to get to. And I don't even want to get into the complexities of how difficult it is for most people to get into that mindset of helping other people, because most of us, when we think about helping other people, psychologically what we think is, if I help somebody else, Cass, that means I'm not moving forward. If I help my competitors or if I help somebody else move forward, that means they're going to now come and compete against me, which means now I have somebody else who I've taught, especially my own techniques, and now they're going to compete against me. My God, I'm going to stop right there. I don't even want to get into that conversation because it's too deep. But my point being is, you have to decide for yourself, what is your purpose? Why are you here? What was the reason for you of being born? And I tell you this question because most people, this actually should actually be the first question most people ask themselves. But the reality is, I know most people aren't going to ask that, so I'm not going to even get into that. That's for a lot more of an intensive course that I would get into that with, with leaders, with people who are already achieving high levels of success. But my point being is, there has to come a point in your life when you actually look at your life and ask, why are you here? Why are you on planet Earth? Why were you born now? Clearly, you could have been born, I don't know, in the 1940s. Your life would have been completely different. As a black person, as a somebody who, imagine your family back in the 1940s, how poor you would have been. Your life would have been completely different. Imagine as a female, if you were born in the 1940s, your life of what you could and could not do would be completely different. What you could go after. I've just been watching this series on Netflix about women, and one of the things that they were talking about, which I actually didn't even know this until I started watching this, and the program has been talking about how women could not represent themselves in the eyes of the law. In other words, a woman could not go to this. This is the 1960s here. In 1960, a woman could not go and represent herself in court because a woman was seen as being subordinate to the man. In other words, if a woman had a problem with somebody else, the man had to represent her. Which is, a woman essentially could not own any property. A woman couldn't buy a house in 1960. And it sounds insane to even think about it, because what do you mean, Kaz? A woman in 1960s, that was how it was like. So you think about how you are now as a woman. Imagine if you were born in the 60s and how you are now and your mentality now. Imagine what your life would be like. And so clearly you've been born today and you have great advantages and some things that are disadvantages. But I'm just saying to you, why is it specifically that you were born now? What is it about your mentality, your gifting, the way you see the world that is so different and is so unique that is going to be a benefit to our generation? Because all of us have something to offer. That finishes today's journal entries. I don't know whether it's been useful. I don't know whether you found it any help at all, but I hope that it's added some value to the quality of your life. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? What have you been journaling about recently? What is success to you? What is motivation? What does a good life mean to you? Write it down. Start your own journaling. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, Castlemotive Guys, on YouTube if you want to get more of this kind of stuff. But apart from that, thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.